I'm going to start it off with just a real brief discussion of the preservation working groups. The working groups are one of the two real key elements of these 4 regional partnerships, the other one being obviously the annual meetings that we have in the 4 partnership areas. These National Bridge Preservation Working Groups focus themselves on a key topic area, somewhere related to bridge preservation. They're open to any member of the partnership, and in fact, it's probably open to just about anybody. If there's an interested party out there who's not a member but's got something that can contribute, we certainly welcome their input. It's basically an all-volunteer effort. So in other words, the products like Travis was talking about are developed by the members of the group on a volunteer basis. Although some of the groups are able to attach themselves to some additional resources, like maybe some research funds or a national scan sponsored by the national groups, so they can get additional resources if they feel they're necessary. They meet monthly via web conference. They develop and pursue their own objectives. They develop their own work plans, and they decide on what deliverables they want to produce. There's no specified lifespan for the working groups, and in fact, many of them start out with kind of a limited objective, if you will, and then as they go forward, they see there's other opportunities for additional work, so they expand their objectives and end up producing more deliverables that are useful, I think, to all the entire preservation community. So we're going to have Greg Freeman first come up, and Greg is going to talk about actually 2 topics. He's going to discuss the activities of the group that's developing communication efforts and reaching out to local agencies to get them involved in the preservation community. And then he's also going to tag onto that a discussion of some bridge preservation pocket guides that are developed kind of in a partnership between the 4 regional partnerships and FHWA's Bridge Preservation Expert Task Group. So I'll ask Greg to come up. Greg is the Director of Business Development with Kwickbond Polymers. So please welcome Greg.
It looks like we're going to talk about the local agency outreach group first, which did start in the West. Travis is here. He and I co-chair this group. Started out as a Western activity, and then we realized it started gaining a lot of momentum. And part of that has to do with the federal highway, the message they're trying to get across to the locals about bridge preservation as part of an asset management plan. And so now the Federal Highway ETG group is involved. The AASHTO subcommittees are getting more involved. Anyway, it's turned into a national group. And I know some of the other groups have listed all the members. We're really starting to gain momentum. And as John was suggesting, we need some support. I'm going to go through this a little bit and hopefully maybe motivate some people in the room. Talking to the folks from Stantec yesterday, I was kind of maybe surprised at how interested some of the consulting groups might be in getting out and sharing this message. But I'll go and explain the whole thing, what we are. We're breaking this thing into two sections. The first section, which kind of Travis is spearheading, is kind of teaching the local agencies what an asset management plan is and how bridge preservation is part of an asset management plan. And what was interesting is some of our conversations evolved is considering the difference between various cities and counties as far as what kind of assets they have, if any, what kind of people they have, if any, what kind of structures they own, and what kind of interest they have. And as we're evolving, we're seeing some pretty progressive agencies around the country that are doing some really good stuff, some of it statewide. We want to introduce preservation and demonstrate the benefit costs and things like that. We want to also kind of share, we're cross-pollinating the information that's coming from all these different groups, and we want to promote what each other is doing and what resources are available. And I'll talk about some of that as well coming up. Anyone familiar with a very similar chart there on the right about how preservation activities are successful in maintaining fair and good condition of structures? It's a pretty standard graph or chart on how these activities work. We are creating these modules. Brandon, Henning, and myself are leading this effort to create three slides for various preservation activities. So we tried to find different subject matter experts to come up with 3 slides, and I have a list of the activities that we chose. We determined that we're going to grow this list of activities and create these modules and allow the agencies to determine what particular activities they're most interested in. And then the other thing that Judith here is involved with, and some other folks, Ed, might be able to talk a little bit more about, because this is an ongoing process, about how to get the local agencies to attend these meetings, how that fits into the legal structure of AASHTO, how it's going to be funded, if they're going to be able to vote. Anyway, that's ongoing, and some of the regional partnerships have taken a more progressive approach to that on their own. And then as far as what AASHTO's doing, that's a pretty slow process. I don't know if there's going to be any further updates on that. I think there's a few people in that room that have a little more understanding of where that's going. This is the one thing that I want to kind of clarify is who our audience is. The way we want to do this initially, and it may evolve, is to reach out to LTAP. I think we have one LTAP person in the room. We want to start with that, reach out to LTAP, express our interest, what we're trying to do, what our goals are, maybe get NACE involved, get the local federal highway, the state federal highway person involved, and the local agencies involved to support this. It's also interesting to see in every different state what the local agencies' relationships are with the states as far as funding and communicating and ownership of and managing preservation, maintenance, these structures. So that's our intent, and we want to kind of build some momentum. Initially, we want to come in and give LTAP the torch and say, can you guys take the lead role in bringing the folks together? I think what we'll do is we're going to go to various states, and we're going to invite the agencies that have an interest, that have some funding, that have some structures that they want to maintain, maybe have some funding, and maybe have maintenance crews as well. So broadly, that's our audience. So what we want to do, we're going to have an hour presentation, kind of a lunch and learn. We want to have industry support this, whether it's consultants or industry folks that are out here in this room, offer to come in and provide a lunch, an hour-long thing. So we want to break it down maybe into 3 sections. The first part, an overview of what is an asset management plan, especially from a local agency. How does preservation fit into that? What is preservation? What is TSP2? What do they do? What are these partnerships? Why might you want to get involved? How do we identify bridges for preservation? What does a preservation project even look like? And how would that possibly fit into an asset management plan? And then we're going to talk about some of the activities. We decided we'd have 2 to 3 slides for each different activity. We tried to pick activities that were considered beneficial from a benefit-cost ratio and start with those. Like I said, ultimately we want to grow the list of activities so that prior to showing up, we can have the folks that are going to attend determine what particular activities they want to talk about. We do have, I don't know how many we have, 8 or 10 activities listed here. We have 2 or 3 slides for these various activities. We do need to kind of fine tune them. We were just talking about that. We're making some headway. Initially, we wanted to kind of get off the ground in February. We also don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We want to make sure that we have something really good to offer. So it's kind of getting pushed back a little bit, but we're getting much closer. Going to kind of blow through what some of these slides might look like. Like I said, we'll have 3 slides for these various activities: joint systems, thin overlays, bridge cleaning and washing. It seems that bridge cleaning and washing is taking a more prominent role as a preservation activity. We chose it as for one of the pocket guides, one of the 4 pocket guides that are developed that I'm going to talk about. As momentum grows for interest in bridge cleaning and washing, it seems to be a great benefit. Maintenance painting, this is another one of our pocket guides. Patching is going to be a new pocket guide, but there's a lot of interest in patching. Another thing that we're doing with one of the national groups is developing the patching matrix that a few folks in this room are involved with. Penetrating sealers, we've heard some discussions on the penetrating sealers, which are different than crack sealers. So we want to differentiate that so that various agencies understand what's the difference. Another thing that seems to be kind of falling by the wayside, but there's still a lot of activity around using membranes and asphalt, so that was included as well. With the Federal Highway, with the Bridge Preservation Expert Task Group, one of the entities that is kind of partnering, and when I say partnering, feds are really pushing the local agencies to develop these plans, especially the ones that have assets and structures. Part of this ETG, one of the activities is their communication plan that's evolving, and the communication plan has some activities that are specifically related to local agency outreach. That video that Dale shared, I don't know how many people saw it. I have a slide. I was going to show it again, but I don't need to. That just came out, was one of the activities. The NHI manual that's out there, that's an arm of the Federal Highway training arm. Another thing I want to mention, so there's various resources that are out there and already somewhat accepted, but we want to kind of reiterate what these various resources are, how they're being used, how they can be used moving forward. I'm going to talk a little more about the AASHTO TC3 program and some of the tools they're developing, which is really interesting, and I'll share some of that, and you'll see some further training coming through the ETG as well. Pocket guides, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which are now our phone apps, and when I presented at Baton Rouge in Southeast in April, I wasn't able to stand in front of, we had a pretty large group, I wasn't able to stand in front of the group and say, you can pull out your smartphone right now, everybody in this room, whether it's Android or iPhone, and you can actually upload 3 of those pocket guides. So I'm going to talk about those pocket guides. Pretty awesome tool, and so you'll hear more about that in a minute. But everybody in this room that has a smartphone, right now, you can either access on the TSP2 website these pocket guides, but you can actually pull them up off your phone. We determined, some of us are older than some of the young folks that are out there making decisions, whether it be on the agency side or in the field, that are used to using their phones for everything. And so it makes a lot of sense. And here we are today, finally be able to tell you guys that you can upload these apps today. How do you do it? Well, you can. So if you go to your app store, you can go TP Overlay Pocket Guide, Bridge Washing Pocket Guide, or a Bridge Painting Pocket Guide, and you can upload those 3. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Joint Systems Pocket Guide, which is kind of still floating out there. That's going to come out. The Patching Pocket Guide has already started, and I'll talk about that. Yeah, if anyone literally wants to take their phone and do that right now, feel free, because we don't even know how many people have uploaded these. They're kind of really only been available for a week or 2, right? Yeah. Are people in this room familiar with the AASHTO TC3 program? A few people. Most state DOTs have paid a fair sum of money to have access to this training curriculum, and they've done a pretty incredible job at accessing a lot of training that's out there, really good training. What's interesting to me is they're coming out with sister training programs for the pocket guides, and they're really cool. I've watched them. They will be available. The other thing that's interesting is that the Federal Highway has paid for LTAP to provide access to all this training for all local agencies at no cost. I think that is true. That's what I was told. I asked, and they confirmed that any local agency will have access to this mega encyclopedia of all these training modules. The status of the 3 first pocket guides you can see are up there. The thin polymer overlay one's complete, and the other 2 are pretty close. They're all narrated. They stop at various places, make you take little quizzes. I've done it, and it's kind of fun and short and very informative. And they'll also give you an idea, if you want a broad idea of what the pocket guides are, you can first go to these TC3 training modules and get a better sense. And I'm going to talk a little more about that. Part of our implementation plan, we're a partnership. So we're here, we're the messengers. All of us here are the messengers, and we have these great tools. Unless you understand what these tools are and get some passion and enthusiasm for the value of these tools, they're just going to sit, like a lot of stuff does, a lot of research and things like that, just sit in a database and never get used. And kind of unfortunate. I guess I'm the grease for the squeaky wheel here. I want to really kind of share in my enthusiasm for what we have, so that we can get this partnership and this group of people out pushing and promoting and getting involved with these working groups as well moving forward. There's a lot of information for local agencies on the NCPP webpage here. Now on this page, you can actually, On the front page, you can access the pocket guides, the printed pocket guides, and a lot of other training. The other thing we're promoting is the multi-day training that they offer to local agencies. Ed has gone out with some states. I know Indiana was a pretty successful program. Rhode Island, another one, or Alabama? Several states. So we'll have more information when we get out to do our 1 hour thing, kind of share a little more in depth what else is being offered for like a 2-day program. There's a small fee involved with that, but it's a multi-day, more intensive program for getting into the nuts and bolts with the local agencies about promoting preservation. We're kind of in a place with this local agency outreach where we've got the western states, and we were kind of the founding states of this working group.
Obviously, everybody has good intentions, but at the end of the day, it comes down to funding. Are there any mechanisms that we can help them with to kind of clear the way?
Funding for the local outreach?
Yeah, no, funding for the local agencies to do the work.
What we're trying to do is local agencies want a fixed price that'll include their registration, their flights,
I think that's it.
all their expenses
Is that
to
on
a
the
meeting.
desk?
Yeah.
And so that's what we've been able to do at NCPP. We're setting this up. We do that same thing for Canada because they want it. And that's because they want it that way because just for budgetary reasons, so that they can plan in advance, and also for continuity, for them to have people coming to our meetings and coming to our meetings and participate
I
one
think I
year
just
and then
replaced
bringing it back.
The one you, the new
year
one you
after
gave me on
year,
here, I
so,
replaced it in that drive
If
there.
there's any comments, if you guys think that are here from local agencies think that'd be a good
No,
thing,
that's the old one.
we'd be glad to discuss that.
Right.
Well, one of our biggest challenges is the do nothing and they'll build me a new bridge perspective. And that's something we've been dealing with in the working group. That's been a big discussion. We've got to come up with some good incentives for them to take on preservation. I think there were some suggestions yesterday about some incentives. There was a discussion on incentives. But right now, you know, do nothing and they'll build me a new bridge doesn't really, that's their incentive right now.
So many of the locals that I work with are undertrained, so they don't know what the best practices are for preservation. They're underfunded, so I have a jurisdiction that has 25 bridges, and their annual budget is $75,000 a year for all their roads and bridges. So it's not a manner of it's just prioritizing, you know, where can I plug the hole the best? And so I think that's what our Idaho LTAC's trying to do, is what are low-hanging fruit ways for us to preserve our bridges, just to at least kick the can down the road so that we can maintain what we've got. And I don't think anybody's intentionally, unless it's the bridge is about to fall apart, nobody's going to intentionally not do work on it. I think it's more of there's no budget for the
Yeah, and I think
program.
that's a problem across the country. More than half the bridges in the country are owned by cities, counties, and towns. And it's just a shame that you get such small funding. And I think once, you know, we're thinking about changing the name of our social media working group to something else, either communications or bridge preservation sales or whatever we're going to call it. But we've got to get that word out, and that's one of the things that group is doing. We're communicating with with each of the state's public information officers. So there's a lot of different avenues, but we've got to make people want to get some money out to these towns. We're really an organization of states, and we can assist local agencies as much as possible. But there's some people that are very most states have a means of funding, but to some extent, and these funds that are involved in this program really can't be utilized for local agencies, but we can promote our perspective of bridge preservation. So it's a good conversation while these guys are straightening this out.
Yeah, so I've gotten outreach from several local agencies as a state corrosion engineer,
Hey,
and
Dennis?
is this on?
Can you get this up?
And I find that they have a lot of engineers that are multidisciplined, and they don't know what they're doing a lot of time with bridges. And when they learn from me the cost of things, their eyes widen up. They don't understand what it takes to preserve these bridges, and when they find out just what it takes to simply do some chloride tests or chain drag a bridge and what that impact is to their traffic and cost for traffic control, they can barely support that. So they don't even have an idea of the cost. So they don't even know what question they're asking when it comes to funding. So all this education is really good, but we need to make sure to get the right knowledge in the right hands so they can even know what question to ask, so they can start asking for the funds.
Yeah, and every state is different.
Yeah, I agree. You hit the nail on the head. I don't think it's a matter of incentivizing. I think it's a matter of coming up with dedicated funding streams for the local agencies to be able to do those things. That if we can educate them, certainly there's tremendous amount of value in that, but until they actually have the dollars to do the preservation. Right now, their only access to dollars competitively, getting money from the state is when their bridges are in bad condition and they need to be replaced. But there needs to be some sort of mechanism that they can get dollars to actually do the preservation like the states are doing. Until we get to that point, then we're still going to be talking about it.
Sorry, Greg, we hijacked your presentation.
No, I'm glad, because we have a lot of time.
So I would just say that that's not
segue.
unilateral, though. There are local agencies that are implementing their own gas tax or fees and stuff, where they are putting in place their own programs, and it's really encouraging to see. And I heard yesterday during one of our meetings that it was also some of the selection criteria for a bridge replacement, right? So that's that kind of worst first mentality that a lot of us fall into. But if you want to get your bridge replaced, part of that scoring is, well, are you doing some preservation on other structures as part of your work? And that was, to me, a phenomenal idea. And just kind of some of those incentives where they have the ability to raise their own taxes. I live in a town of 1,200, and we're passing a measure this month to go ahead and start redoing our roads. It can be done.
Yeah, I was going to mention one thing, because when we were in Indiana maybe 4 months ago, the local LTAP folks there are doing an incredible job. And part of that, well, they had a whole room full of cities and counties. And a lot of these cities and counties are putting asset management plans together. And they have a gas tax in the state of Indiana. So there's a huge influx of funding now, more recently, to these local agencies. And there's an incredible amount of communication. They were doing these multi-day trainings, and a lot of enthusiasm in the room, and a lot of the local agencies were spending money, and they were putting asset management plans together. And I know that the way some of the federal highway funding, I don't know if Dale, if you can speak, or anyone else, I think, I'm not sure the mechanism, but there's federal funding that is supposed to trickle down to local agencies if you take the steps. And I know part of that have to do with coordinating some level of an asset management plan with the state. Do you know anything about how that works, Dale?
Actually, it's up to each state.
Okay.
And you have to work through the state DOT to get the federal funding for bridges. There are some special programs, like last year we had a special program for bridges with populations with low density. This year there's a special program that's out right now that they can apply through the state again for the states that have bad bridges this year. Next year they're talking another program, and that's going to be different than this one.
Okay. So I think that communication isn't always made. A lot of these cities and counties just don't know how to access available funds. So that's another part of the program. I'm going to talk now about these pocket guides. So the Thin Polymers TP Overlay Pocket Guide, TPO Pocket Guide. Thank you, Brian. TPO Pocket Guide, Bridge Washing Pocket Guide, and Bridge Painting Pocket Guide. Pretty cool. I guess we'll talk about it here and you'll get a better sense. The Federal Highway Bridge Preservation Expert Task Group, there's 18 folks that are involved with this group. All the chairs of the AASHTO committees and state DOTs and industry and academia. And Ed and John are involved as well. Pretty robust group, and I'm going to explain what we did. Well, first of all, we started out with 4 categories. I talked briefly about when I was here 10 years ago, I gave a presentation, and I've given a lot of presentations based on my concern for the preservation activities that I was promoting coming from industry back in the day, making sure that I wanted to make sure they were used correctly. I have given many presentations on mitigating potential failure mechanisms, and I've seen further presentations. And when we came up with these categories, except for bridge cleaning, that kind of got pulled in, the joint systems and replacing and removal of coatings, those seem to be three preservation activities that have the greatest potential for mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes are on the design side, but more commonly they're on the construction side. Often it involves communication and understanding of best practices. So the intent of these pocket guides is to mitigate potential failure mechanisms within the context of preservation activities that have a high potential rate for failure mechanisms. What did we do? We got what we figured, we're subject matter experts within these categories, and they reached out broad and far and wide, to the best they could as individuals, to come up with a team of folks to develop these pocket guides. A lot of work went into it. We had subgroups. We wanted to have somewhat of a checklist format. If you look at the thin polymer overlay pocket guide, you can see that guide is a checklist. If you're going to do a thin polymer overlay, you can actually go through the checklist. If you're an inspector, you can go through the checklist with a contractor, and you can actually take that checklist when you're done, and you can email it, and you can file it with the construction documents after all is said and done, and everyone gets paid and walks away. Really cool idea. Like I said, potential failure mechanisms. We developed the draft, and we send them out again for further review. Speaking of further review, that's kind of where the joint system pocket guide got held up. It just became a massive tool, and it wasn't really fully in line with the intent of mitigating potential failures and having a checklist format. We want this to be easy to use. We want this to be accessible, and we want it to be used. We're going to go back to the drawing board with the Joint Systems Pocket Guide. To back up a little bit, the Federal Highway paid for these pocket guides. The Federal Highway can't endorse activities like this. So TSB2 is hosting these pocket guides. GPI, which was hired as a subcontractor to develop these along with ARA, folks that were here are not here anymore, did a really great job, and they're still working in contract with the Federal Highway to continue to develop further pocket guides and come up with some other sister training programs and things that are out there. This is interesting because a lot of people don't understand, really from a broad perspective, why we would want design people, why would they care about a pocket guide? Any industry folks in this room might understand, and this is kind of the best part of the story from my perspective, from my history of watching these projects be installed and look at the kind of the dots that you would connect to see what creates a successful project. It really starts with a good specification. What could be an interesting scenario is we have these great pocket guides, pretty common, but let's say the inspectors get a hold of these pocket guides. These jobs are often, almost always, low bid. The low bid contractor shows up, the inspector shows up, decides they want to use the pocket guide. They come out and look at the specifications, and you go through the QC process, review of the construction documents. They don't line up with best practices, and so the inspector might say, well, you're not doing this or you're not doing that. It's right here in my pocket guide, and the contractor says, well, it's not in the specification. I didn't bid it that way. So if it says to shot blast to a certain profile or something like that, I didn't put that in my bid. Here we are, manufacturer's representatives. You're our client. The owners are our client as well. It's really hard for us to come back at that point and say, well, you have to come back and shot blast the way that we tell you to shot blast. And then there's pointing, arguing, and all kinds of stuff can happen. So anyway, it's real critical, I think, that the design folks that are writing specifications and standards understand what happens in the field. This missing link in the communication chain is a big deal, and we always talk about it and kind of joke about it, but it's real critical that we all start talking from the design side down to the installers. Inspectors, obviously, I've heard the discussion, and it's an ongoing discussion, And I've witnessed it more than not show up on a job, and the inspector maybe hasn't even looked at the specifications and standards. Maybe they have. They have no understanding. They may have an understanding of the application, but often, very commonly, they have no clue. They're not experts. Industry folks are always offering to train inspectors, but it's really hard to get a whole room full of inspectors to train. We've tried, we keep trying and consistently try. Contractors, installers, I know from my perspective, I've often gone to visit contractors prior to the start of a project and given a presentation on what's the best practices and what we expect as a manufacturer, what we expect them to bring, what tools and equipment. They never show up. I actually used to bring some of the stuff myself because I knew they wouldn't show up with some of these tools. Maintenance crews. More than not, what's interesting to me, I've worked with a lot of maintenance crews over the years, often prison crews in the state of Idaho and things like that, and you show up and there's like 30 or 40 people out there. The maintenance crews take ownership of their structures. I could tell stories all day long about the passion and enthusiasm these folks have with their limited funding to make sure that their bridges within their district or region perform well, and that they don't have to be going out there all the time and doing pothole repairs and patching and things like that. So it's real interesting to see the enthusiasm behind those crews. It's a little different than the low bid contractor, where you have some low bid contractors that have a lot of integrity and have a lot of enthusiasm. They want to do it correctly. And the low bidder guys that come in and they just want to see how much money they can make. They want to cut every corner. And they're going to argue, and they've got a big legal staff to make sure that they continue to be able to cut every corner that their legal staff can come up with right letters to allow them to do. So like I did talk about the intent, but I'll break it down a little bit. Installation, so it really does back up into condition assessment for some of these things as well, which is really critical. We talked about that in some of our breakouts. Like for an example would be like a thin polymer overlay. There's just certain bridges that you don't want to put a thin polymer overlay on. So we want to back up way back to the folks that are selecting bridges and structures for various preservation activities, or selecting a joint for a joint that has a certain type of a movement, or or certain types of weather or snow plows or different things that are going on. You want to choose the right system so you get the greatest benefit. Limitations, like I said, the key is avoiding potential failure mechanisms and recommended training. And the industry folks are always offering to train inspectors, train contractors, train personnel, come in and support that, because we want our products to be installed correctly. We want these products to be a greater benefit. We can demonstrate a benefit to cost. If you look across the country, there's all kinds of research studies of various preservation activities where they've taken the time to look at the benefit to cost. And if you look through these research studies, you always see the failures and what are the failures. And Becky was talking about the scan tour of the joint systems, and we're going to come back and we're going to actually try to bring the information that they've come up with, because it's all about avoiding potential failures. So we want to take that into account, and we want to look at that. But that's really what it comes down to. And then training support and QA/QC, that comes back on the front end, making sure that the proper quality control in the QA/QC procedures are implemented into the construction documents. The first guide that was completed was the thin polymer overlay guide. That was the one that I was, I guess, most enthusiastic about, because, like I said, for years I've seen contractors have various ideas about how to install these projects and these products correctly, whether they want to get in and out fast, or they want to just comply with the standards, or they want to just do a really good job. And there's a lot of variability. You can see the contents. We get down into the nuts and bolts, really down into the nitty-gritty of best practices with all these pocket guides. They've gone through a lot of review, and we really do. These tools are very valuable. And if you look at the content, if you even take a few minutes, whether you pull them up on your phone app or you get online and look at these pocket guides, you can see how much depth and how much information is available. And then you can look at it from that perspective, or you can go right to the checklist, and you can see how the checklist can be used to implement the content. we get into some of the stuff like for a thin overlay. What is a thin overlay? Why would you want to use it? Where would you want to use it? Because that's really where it starts. What's the design intent? You know, really from a design side, if you're going to fund the use of a thin overlay, why? You know, why do you want to understand what the intent is from a design perspective and from a funding perspective? Important part is condition assessment as well. And I think it's a big important part. What was interesting about this, we went through a pretty extensive process because a lot of the folks that were involved from a subject matter expert point of view had very enthusiastic perspectives on condition assessment, different perspectives. So what we had to do is take a step back and look at what other resources that are out there, good resources. There's a lot of good resources, and we decided to default back to that. The Joint System Pocket Guide, we're going back to the table, and we're going to revisit that here very shortly, and we're going to bring that back and hopefully be able to offer that sooner than later. The Bridge Cleaning Guide is a great tool because most state agencies or local agencies don't really understand all the hurdles. Chris, there's some information online about what Washington went through, environmental hurdles and all kinds of stuff that's out there. It's all in this guide. This particular, we had various ideas on what we wanted to do with bridge coatings. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of guidance, and we wanted to kind of minimize that, and we decided we're going to break that up into 3 categories. Removable and replacements, the first category. So we get into that. Here's some screenshots. You can actually, on the front page of the TSP2 webpage, here's the link. You can get on there and print the pocket guides, shows you where they are. You can get the apps now on Android as well, which I just found out a few days ago. This is part of our implementation plan, and we're all part of this partnership. So hopefully some of the folks in this room will have a chance to say, this is a good tool. I can use it. I have other people that can use it. And I want to share this tool with other people, and we get it out there and it gets used. We're planning webinars and the presentations, the TC3 videos I spoke of, and further FHWA videos that are being funded, and then the apps. We've got some other pocket guides coming up. You can see here. This is where we're headed. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, so I was supposed to talk to you about the DEC working group, and I thought, well, what would be an excellent way of getting into the DEC working group would be to bring up the website and show you how we'd find details on the DEC working group. There's an awful lot going on, but I wanted to show you the website. I don't know how many of you use tsp2.org. tsp2.org/bridge. We're a big and very well-populated website. For example, I'll give you a couple examples on the website because we have website development as one of our initiatives as well. If you want to look at our bridge video library, for example, you know, we take videos of each one of these meetings. We've got between 400 and 500 videos and PowerPoints on the website. For example, if I go to DEC and I say, okay, let's just look at an example. We have the PowerPoints over here of what was actually presented. Then we also have a Bridge Deck Preservation Working Group.
You're back online.
What we really want to do is we want to find out what are owners looking for as far as their decks are concerned. You want to know who's using polymers, who's using overlays, who's using sealers, and what in the world. And get the contact information from those people. So we've developed a database states are participating in, and so far we're working on overlays and sealers. We have information as to who in the state is the contact person for the particular products that they're using, and who is the manufacturer for those particular products. It's not a list of approved products, but it's a list of what's being used. What are you guys really using in your contracts, and what are you guys really using with your in-house forces? That's what we want to share back and forth. And so that's underway. Everybody wants that information, to look at that information, but we are really kind of slow as to sharing that information. We've only got we don't have enough states that have populated their products yet, and so we're going to be pushing on that. And then our next phase is going to be patching materials for decks. What in the world are you patching your decks with? Well, why do you like it? Is it good for stopping and turning? Is it good for long-term? Is it, are you having any problems? It isn't a negative database whatsoever. So you can go and click on a particular product and see who is using, what states are using that product, or you can click on a particular state and find out what products that state is actually using. So it's really a good interactive database. And this was all Mike Johnson from Caltrans was the one who thought this up, and we got special funding from the oversight panel of the TSP2 program to build this database. So recently, some of you probably got an email with a short questionnaire on patching materials. So we're going to start doing the same thing with patching materials. It'd be nice to know what the rest of the country's using with patching materials. But you sure don't want to know what 6 other states are doing. You want to know what 50 other states are doing. So if you participate, then you'll have all this information available. And who is the right person to talk in your state about these materials? Is it somebody from materials and research? Is it somebody from maintenance? Is it somebody from construction bureau? It might be all 3. You might have a list of, I talked with Texas, and Texas said, I'm going to have to go out to my districts because each district is different and find out what we're using, because they really don't know what they're using because districts do it all on their own. Really going to be a nice, robust tool for us, and once we get it together, once we get you guys to help populate it, I really think it'd be a great tool. Back to the website, to our video library, for example. I just wanted to show you that we do have close to 400 videos that have been captured on our during our meetings. And so here, for example, here's a video on deck.
So we have Ed Liberati with Hydro Technologies. He'll give us a presentation on 25-year bridge deck preservation.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about, like Travis said, 25-year bridge deck.
So we don't want to hear him again. But that's just one example. But if there are 400 videos in here on all of these various topics, you can use asset management, corrosion mitigation, bridge design, joints and bearings, local agency, products, new materials, miscellaneous. We had to have a miscellaneous category, otherwise we would have had 100 of these buttons to click on. Painting, all sorts of topics. So we've got it pretty well subdivided. Training, for example, there's presentations were done on training. But this is excellent for your training. You can look under any of these particular categories and you can say, okay, let me pull these up for my own personal edification, or if you want to train some other people. It's right here and it's available. Let me give you some other ideas about the website. We know, because Dennis can check how many guys are really on the website and how long they stay on the website and how many different buttons they go back and forth to. So we get the metrics of our website. What we learned is we need to do some training. So I am going to build a library. Here's the Western page. This is just for you guys. All the previous meetings, details on all the previous meetings. Here's our present board of directors that we're going to change in a few minutes. Monthly minutes for each of our calls that we have every month. Here are all the people that are actually on those calls and what we actually discussed. And if we happen to have a technical presentation, the details on that will be attached. Like I said, there's a fantastic amount of information here. If you just go across this black bar, we have research, we have a library, we have all sorts of technical things. Bridge specifications, we've sort of stopped that because you guys, what we really need to do is get links to each state's specifications. They're changed daily. Specifications are changing all the time, and we can't, for us to keep track of that, so we're going to bring some links in. Legislative actions, training. For example, if any state has done some training and they want to share it with other folks, we do training our own, but here, for example, Louisiana training, Maine gave us all of their training modules. There's all sorts of NHI training courses, all sorts of stuff. So I just want to show you how robust this really is. It is a great tool. So do you have any questions about our website? Yes, there are. Yeah, we've just posted, I think, 2 of them, or 3. Yeah. So it's out there. There's an awful lot on there. If you have something you want to put on and share, we are available. Obviously, we can't have McDonald's ads, but we can do just anything related to bridge preservation. We'd be glad to post.
But there's a new kid on the working group block now. It's just getting underway. And that working group is going to be addressing what looks like a fairly broad topic area. That's the quality of construction when you're doing a preservation project, whatever that preservation project might be. So this list right here is the list of the people that have signed up for the group already. I put my email address down there in the right-hand corner because I am sort of on a general recruiting mode. We want to recruit people who are interested in this topic from whatever preservation aspect you're familiar with. And if you contact me, I can hook you into our monthly calls, which will, well, we had one already. The next one will probably be the end of this month, and then we'll be doing them monthly, probably in the last week of the month. A situation where a preservation project didn't really give you the results you were looking for, there's probably two broad categories of reasons. One might be that simply that application wasn't appropriate for the location, the environment, the conditions, or whatever. But I think we're working our way through that particular aspect of preservation performance pretty well as these meetings go forward. But lurking in the background, unfortunately, is that issue of whether or not the quality of the application of the whatever treatment you're doing is really what you're looking for. And that could probably result from quite a few different, let me go to the slideshow here, quite a few different reasons. It may be that the specifications are, they're unclear, they're not adequate for the situation. It may be that some of the personnel assigned to the project don't have the proper training in what they're looking at, either inspecting or doing the application. It could be that there's a mix-up in communication between a supplier and a contractor. There may be some inherent flaw in the process of contracting for preservation that might hinder the ultimate quality of the end result. So it's kind of a broad area. We had our initial call early in April, and then we got kind of sidetracked with the Southeast meeting and the Western meeting. So we're gearing up again now to start having our regular monthly calls. During that April call, we kind of jumped into a discussion of why some situations hot mixed asphalt overlays seem to perform pretty well, and why in other situations the same thing doesn't apply very well, maybe from one state to another. During the continuing calls, we're going to be kind of reaching out and trying to identify what the most critical issues are that this group could address. Probably going to do some kind of a survey of all the states to find out what you think the most critical issues in construction quality are. Then we'll define what our objectives will be. We'll develop our working plans and decide what we might want to produce as a deliverable product from this group. So that's pretty much it as far as the update on this group. Again, if you have any comments or questions, I certainly would like to take them, but particularly if you're interested in working with this group, get in touch with me, because I think this is going to be an ongoing group that'll probably go on, well, I don't know, maybe years, because it's obviously such a broad topic area.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.